Alan's with us, so perhaps he can help as well. He certainly helped me last week.
We got on tonight, Jeff. Well done.
Right, we're all running.
Okay, so in that case, we are now live, and I'd like to welcome everyone to this evening's extra meeting of the Planning Committee, upon which there is only one agenda item, as members will be aware, and that's discussion or an update of where we are with the local plan. Before we move on, could I just ask if we do have any apologies for this evening? I know Councillor Northcote is trying to join us. I don't know of any other apologies, having looked at my mail. I don't know if any other member has any apologies to bring. In that case, if I could just ask our clerk, Jeff Durham, if there's anyone lurking in the waiting room who can be brought into the meeting. That's another possibility, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm just bringing Councillor Moffat in, Chair.
Okay. So we should now have Councillor Moffat, and indeed we do. So if there are no further apologies, I think we should begin the meeting. And I think what I'll do at this point is ask Mr. Fleet to introduce the item for discussion.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this is the item on the agenda. It relates to a report going to Cabinet, setting out the process of the joint local plan and thinking around the direction that the plan should take going forward in 2021. I have a short presentation, so if I just upload that on the share screen. Okay. Hopefully you can all see the opening page. Okay. So I've broken down the presentation into three core areas. The background of how we got to where we are now, the review that's been undertaken over the December-January period, and an item about delivery if Cabinet were to consider separating from Stoke and undertaking its own borough local plan instead of a joint local plan, what matters might arise in that process. So the background, key parts of where we've got with the current plan, how we started on the joint plan, and then going through to events of last year. So the borough does have a development plan in place. This was adopted in 2003 as a Newcastle plan, and then it was followed in 2009 by a strategic document, the Joint Core Strategy, 6 years later. The minerals plan and the waste plan, as you can see on the screen there as well, those four documents are essentially the core of the borough, of the development plan for the borough, but they are importantly supported as well by neighbourhood plans, two of which have now been adopted and more are in the pipeline as well. So those are the local policies that we use. We also, though, in our decision making, have to give consideration to a number of national inputs as well. So the NPPF, latest edition from 2019, and the Planning Practice Guidance website are central to that as well. And also we have, if I just move the screen, we also have a number of acts. Now I've just very briefly picked three there of the key documents, but there are many others as well. And we're driven as well by case law. So this might be written reps appeals that have come through. We've also had cases that have gone to examination or Supreme Court cases as well. So at different levels, they will have influenced the decision making both within Newcastle and across the UK as well. And ministerial statements, that's another item that comes through. Colleague of mine's just contacted, so if you bear with me, actually, I'm just going to, Jeff, Could you ask Gemma, invite Gemma in, please? We've just got a little hiccup there in the background.
It's okay. I think I'm in.
Ah, fantastic.
Carry
Okay,
on.
thank you. So going back to the joint local plan, how did we start this process? Well, the joint core strategy was adopted in 2009. We've then followed up at Newcastle with a site allocations and policies plan. This was unique just for the borough itself, and work commenced on that for 4 years. But consideration was drawn to the fact that that document was a Newcastle only plan, and the joint core strategy at the time was still a very live, fresh document, 4 years old. Questions around soundness were raised, whether actually the Newcastle plan could succeed at examination given the policies with the joint plan. And it was considered that the Newcastle only site allocations and policies plan would be abandoned at that time and withdrawn, and work started on a joint local plan with Stoke. So those were the events 7 years ago. Since then, the authority has made progress on the joint plan, and you can see there 3 core stages of consultation through 2016 to 18, when work was undertaken on the joint plan to bring it forward. 2019 and 20 have been more focused on evidence base and reviewing, preparing then for what would have been the first consultation document of the submitted plan. So that was where we were heading at this sort of stage after those key 3 stages. However, as everybody will be aware, 2020 has been a very turbulent year. We've got 4 sort of key areas that have come out at that stage. The planning white paper, it's not unique. There have often been reviews of the planning process by central government, but the planning white paper, Planning for the Future, did throw a couple of significant changes into the pot for consideration. Notably, the issue around zoning, areas for growth, regeneration or preservation, and some other changes around permitted development and housing growth figures as well. So the white paper has the potential to totally upend the planning system if it were to be supported. And if you read the press, you'll know there are concerns about that document anyway, so it's in flux. The Brexit departure from the EU matter as well raises questions, just as COVID-19 does for the property markets. Are we going to see a movement towards...
Hey, Mr. Fleet, could I just interrupt for 1 second, if I may?
Yeah.
Are your slides meant to be changing? At the moment, I can see the one that says current development plan for the borough. Is that the correct one to be displayed?
No, you're a few steps off.
Because I'm not the only councillor who's raised that query. So if we could perhaps just put that right, so that we can get you and your slides in sync, so to speak.
Okay. Yes. It's because I'm on a twin screen setup here. If I moved the presentation on the lower screen, it stopped sharing. So I've reverted. Are you now on a slide that says 2020 at the top?
I am indeed, yes.
Thank you. Yes, I'll bear that in mind. Apologies, I'm staring up. It's to the other screen. So yes, as I say, white paper was in there. Departure from the EU via the Brexit events and COVID-19. We don't know where they're going to take us. Professionals, experts in the field talk of things like changing demand for housing type, people moving away from small flats to go into larger properties. That's a COVID-driven article. Demand for warehousing, is that a EU Brexit type matter? We don't know as clearly as we did, or we thought we did 3 or 4 years ago, how the property market and expectations are going to emerge in the future. And HS2, although we don't have a station here, we are on the line and we're only a stone's throw away from Crewe. And that, again, major infrastructure changes could bring major links through down the A500, the M6 corridor, and how that impacts on Newcastle's sort of position within that sort of North Staffordshire area as well. So again, as HS2 comes through, we'll see some of those changes and opportunities emerge. So that was the point. Last year, very much a sort of were the decisions of 2013 still relevant 7 years later? That question led on then to the review stage that we undertook over the sort of winter period. So 4 stages there. We undertook 4 core strands of consultation in that process. We approached key stakeholders. We went on the web and put notice. We did an online survey. And as well, we approached a major consultancy as well for their input into the process. In the summary of the findings, on the online survey, residents were very strongly in favour of the borough plan being a Newcastle only plan. And they also felt that the borough was very much its own authority. It wasn't a subsidiary of Stoke. And actually, Newcastle was Newcastle and deserved its own plan. That outlook, though, was tempered a little bit by the businesses who responded, who were more in favour of sticking with the joint local plan. It's a process that's in train at the moment, and they were looking to keep that stability and keep on with the plan as is. Quite a few people, though, identified 3 core areas as well. Duty to cooperate. Even if the authority were to separate from Stoke, there would still be a requirement to negotiate and liaise with the neighbouring authority, just as we already do with the likes of Cheshire East and Stafford and other authorities surrounding us. That requirement to speak to Stoke won't go away. It is, though, a duty to cooperate. It isn't a duty to agree. And at the end of the day, the authority is not bound to agree to what Stoke wants. However, in reaching any decisions, they need to be well reasoned and reasonable in their approach, and it can be argued why the authority has taken the direction it has. The need for housing delivery, that still remains. The government is linked to a standard methodology for delivering housing numbers, and that will remain for the borough at 355 dwellings. But for some authorities around the country, notably Stoke, there will be an uplift in demand for housing of 35%, which will increase the numbers that they need to deliver. And again, as you might anticipate from an exercise like this, that there was a bit of a split opinion about greenbelt development. So the likes of Save Our Open Space, Friends of the Keel Golf Course, were taking a much more line of preserving open space, while developers were aware of the need to provide housing and that greenbelt may come into that equation. So these are maybes, possibles. I'm not saying that greenbelt will be delivered. It would be wrong of anybody to assume that greenbelt must be used at that time, but it will certainly be a part of that discussion going forward in terms of how do we meet the needs for the people and those who work and live in the borough. A core piece of work, the Lichfields review. They worked with the authority, and as you can see there, they came out with some sort of key points. Working with another authority does add complexity. If you're doing a plan on your own, it's easier. They were aware of the 7 years. This is starting to become a long in the tooth plan. They think that actually, if the borough had control of its own plan, they could actually keep an eye on progress, and rapid progress can be made. Again, those issues that we talked about past evidence basis, duty to cooperate, and delivery of housing, especially affordable housing, were picked up by Lichfields. They've reviewed some of the documents and they've identified the delivery programme in there. So they feel that actually, noting the government's target of December 2023 for the delivery of a plan, theoretically, it can be done. Now, historically, local authorities have taken the time to deliver plans, but there is a process to step through to get from now, early 2011, to adoption in 2023. On that basis, they've looked at some of the key points. They think it actually could be more viable by the authority because it's a single authority driving the process. They don't see any significant challenges in that process. and they can think that it'll be achievable, but resources will be required. And in their experience, and this is a firm that's been doing planning work in the UK for more than 50 years, they think that a robust, flexible plan can get through the process more likely than a long drawn out one. It actually indicates that maybe freshening the plan, putting the fresh impetus into it and driving it forward, rather than keep dragging out a 7-year-old plan longer and longer, may be actually the way not to just get to a consultation document today, but to get to an adopted document which has passed scrutiny by the Planning Inspectorate by 2023, faster than sticking with the JLP. I've now worked, this is the scenario of if we did separate from Stoke and go on our own, we would have to sort of adopt a new style. Trying to do the plan as probably it has been already, and many plans across the country are. Lots of detail, lots of ground covered in them. It's a point picked up in the white paper that the actual many plans are becoming burdensome with the repetition of national policy, and they're taking a long time to go through the mill. Some of our consultees, we are aware, do find comfort in that repetition of national policy in the local plan. There's counter view to that, that if effectively you put a national policy, for example, on flood risk assessment in the local plan, it's locked in, it's convenient, it's there in your document on your desk. But should the government change the criteria for that policy in 2024, 25, what you have in your local plan is then out of date compared to the national policy. Accordingly, sticking to the national issues in the national agenda and the local issues in the local plan actually allows that break between policies becoming out of date. There is a need to focus on delivery and infrastructure. That will be a core part. It will feed in as well to things like the Community Infrastructure Levy, CIL, which will be a core part of how we deliver housing, what areas of the borough can accommodate growth, and what needs to be invested to sustain local communities. But a core part as well of a borough plan is actually focusing in on the neighbourhood plans. We do have them, they're very useful documents, but at the moment they're not a core part of the joint local plan. And one of the things that as officers we're very keen to do is draw the local plan and the borough plan together so that they work hand in glove with each other. The local plan delivering that strategic layer of information where the larger sites are going, but the neighbourhood plans have that ability to highlight the character of the local areas and what can be done. So, for example, a neighbourhood plan can pick up on the building styles, the scale and mass of buildings, the local features that are within a local community that sometimes a local plan can't drill down to get that finesse of detail. But that's something then that the neighbourhood plans as well should, ideally, look at development opportunities and shape some of those. So something like a local plan may identify a site for 50 houses, but the neighbourhood plan can look at where the density of that development lies, where developed space for open space and children's play is provided, how access and walking routes to other neighbouring sites is integrated into the development, and actually providing what is tantamount to a design brief to actually steer a development that is more beneficial to the community, rather than just a very simple single layered local plan allocation that just provides numbers alone. A well written up neighbourhood plan can be a valuable asset in any appeal scenario as well. It's gone through that examination process of its own. It's started to gather substantive weight. It can start to sort of be used as an effective tool to help kick out inappropriate development that might well be harmful to the character of the neighbourhood as well. They are a sort of a document that needs to be worked together with the local plan. The legislation talks about being in conformity. Now, that makes sense if you have a very sort of linear process to your plan making, and you can put all neighbourhood planning in abeyance for a number of years until the local plan is all signed, sealed and delivered. and then start on the neighbourhood plans. That unfortunately isn't reality, and they need to be worked together. The neighbourhood plans, though, like the local plan, will have to be mindful of national policies and actually trying to sort of steer the appropriate types of development. It is a key point, though, that if the neighbourhood plans are silent on site allocations, then they can suffer, and they can be sort of criticised by inspectors. We're seeing those sort of decisions come through, that actually they're being taken as more of a conservation or a preservation plan and not as a tool to sort of help shape their communities. We will be looking again at the project management behind the scenes, the actual day-to-day running of the plan. Personally, I think it's exciting looking at policies and sites. That's me as a planner, but behind that sort of upfront public agenda, there is a lot of work behind the scenes. Our early stages, if we start on the borough plan, will be around the statement of community involvement. We did that last year to add in a clause about consulting in the times of COVID on a digital only agenda. But now we'll have to look at it and take out the Stoke element and deliver a Newcastle only plan. A key document, one that never really gets as much attention as maybe it should, is the local development scheme, the LDS. That is the project plan. That will be the metronome by which the whole project is driven. There will be more behind the scenes of internal management, but that document will be sort of setting when the key stages for consultation are and how we intend to get through that planning process. We're moving very much more to monitoring, using digital systems, improving all of that. So getting live data into the system and moving with Microsoft Project, for those of you who are familiar with Gantt charts and the like, in terms of managing the whole detail to quite a fine level. I'm not keen on pure micromanagement, but at times understanding some of those details about sequencing for meeting committee deadlines and everything is a very useful one to sort of avoid missing key targets. Probably from my own personal background as a sort of civil engineer in an earlier life, I work on the basis of having key foundations. If you can start the plan on a good, strong footing, then it actually means that it should be a lot easier to work forward from there. And we will be engaged a lot more in decision making, updating with members, whether that be at parish level, whether that be at the local authority level, but actually having steering group meetings to help people understand where we're going. I'm on the last slide, fortunately for you now, but we will be looking a lot more at collaborative working. We're looking at the technology, the ICT systems, sharing data as much as we can to make sure that we're on top of everything. The current process has been good, but it can be better, I believe. And I believe with some of these steps and others behind the scenes, that 2023 target is achievable and is one that as officers we find as a challenge and something to work for. But that's the report in summary that will be going to Cabinet for consideration, and it will be for Cabinet to make a decision on the future of the plans there. However, as a group, I appreciate that the planning committee have a huge impact in this process, and we will be updating Cabinet as well on any comments and concerns that you have and feeding them into the meeting as well. So if you do have any questions, either Gemma or myself will be happy to try and help. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Fleet, for that presentation. And I, in particular, I'm thinking about one question that's been asked a lot about this process over time is the time factor. I'm heartened by the fact you're confident that were we to do this by ourselves, there isn't a time issue involved. And I think that's really quite an important aspect of all of this. But I think now is the time to take questions from members. So if members could preferably use the raise hand function, or otherwise visually indicate they wish to speak, now would be the time to ask questions of Mr. Fleet or indeed of Gemma.
I know, Chairman, that the neighbourhood planning aspect of this is one that's a notable change from the previous planning process. If that's of interest to members, happy to take questions on that.
Well, maybe, I mean, again, given that there are also, of course, members of the public here this evening watching the meeting, and they'll be less familiar with this. Perhaps if you would, Mr. Fleet, just outline the hierarchy of how these plans would operate altogether, because I think some people get rather confused between these two things. Before that, though, I notice now that Councillor Moffat and indeed Councillor Jones wish to speak. So if we ask Councillor Moffat first.
Okay, Sean, thanks. That was a really good presentation, exciting as well, and lots of opportunities there. I suppose really my question is, there is one of the points that you made was that there would be a statement of community involvement, and from my point of view, how community involvement happens, and I know COVID conditions makes things incredibly difficult, but what kind of approach would be taken? I'm very aware, particularly of the work that Keele University has done in terms of kind of co-produced community-led design initiatives that are really exciting ways of looking at things like local plans and local development. And it would be fantastic for the borough to be involved in something really innovative in ways in which it genuinely and authentically involves the community and excites the community about the opportunities here.
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Chair, if I can.
Certainly can.
I mean, the starting point for the hierarchy of plans, that starts really with the National Planning Policy Framework, the NPPF, and that itself is then sort of enshrined with the legislation surrounding it, and the greater detail on that document is provided through the planning practice guidance on the website. So that sort of national picture is the starting point to which all local authorities across the UK have to comply. So that's the starting point. Then it goes to the series of sort of, depends on the matter that's being discussed, because we still have things like the Waste and Minerals Plan at the county level, and they also have the joint plan as well. So there are different sort of strands that input into that process, but it's the local plan. Now, the neighbourhood plans are a new sort of feature on the scene effectively in terms of the planning system. But that doesn't mean to say they're the lesser plans or they're a subservient plan. They do need ultimately to be in conformity with the local plan itself, so housing numbers filter through the whole process. But there is an iterative element with neighbourhood plans as well, that they bring that local detail and information that steers back into the local plan itself. So if a neighbourhood community can show that certain areas can't accommodate development, that steers allocations away from that part of the plan, and there is a dialogue between the neighbourhood groups and the local authority in terms of selecting sites and how those two documents emerge concurrently. So that they are sort of hand in glove to a certain extent. So is that helping to answer the question, Councillor, or would Gemma, you've got Gemma?
Yeah, just on your point, a point of a statement of community involvement. So we already have one in place that's a joint one with Stoke. And the first step, if it was chosen to go on a borough plan, would be to review both the local development scheme that Sean talked about and the statement of community involvement. And we envisage we would probably have a 6-week consultation on the statement of community involvement, which would allow us to propose how we're going to consult with the community and allow them to say if that's adequate or not, if you like. So that will have to be brought as a single one for the borough, which means that we can think about new ways in which to work. But I just must press on that if we are to meet this timescale for the local plan, we may have to consider the extent to which we could take sort of new and innovative digital options, for example, into the framework. We have to be realistic about what we can do in this timescale. But I would say on your point is that the white paper that the government have brought out very much suggests a move forward to making consultation a lot more digital. So being able to look at local plans on your phone, being able to look at maps and interactive. So I think regardless of what the borough does, that's the sort of train of thought of the government. So I think in a few years' time, we will see local plans much more easier for the public to access.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Moffat?
Yeah, I look forward to, I mean, I will look at the statement on that's available on the website, which is part of the joint plan. But again, it's about that authentic community involvement. And I know it's difficult. And I think digital opportunities create, more involvement in some ways, but exclude others. But no, I look forward to some of the developing of those ideas. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair, and also thank you for the presentation, Sean. That was a really good, very informative. I just have a very quick question and then a sort of follow-up based on that question. And excuse the naivety in this question, but I presume at some point before this plan is sent to the Secretary of State, there would have to be a resolution at full council to adopt the local plan and lodge that with the Secretary of State. Am I understanding that correctly, that this would require a full council decision in order for this plan to be adopted and sent forward?
I must admit, I believe so. I'd have to double check with colleagues from legal and committee services on that process, but my expectation at this time would be that it would certainly be coming to planning committee and cabinet as two stages in that, but full council as well. I see Dan as is available. Could I pass over, Dan?
By all means, yeah, through you, Chair, to adopt the plan and get it onto the books requires a decision of full council. So cabinet is responsible for proposing the plan to council. Council decides whether or not it wishes to adopt it and bring it into effect. Different authorities have different approaches en route, but it is prudent. Some authorities think it's prudent to take it to council prior to final publication stage, because what an authority wouldn't want to do is to submit a plan for examination that its council hadn't expressed itself content with. So I'm not entirely clear what we've done here or what we were planning to do with this JLP process, but my experience now in getting two local plans into place is that there are at least two trips to full council. One with here's the draft plan in as good a shape as we can get it, members. Shall we take a punt in it or not? And then council say yes, final consultation, inquiry, minor modifications if the inspector is so minded, and then the inspector recommends that it's sound, and then back to council for final adoption of the plan. That's how I'm used to it working. I hope that's helpful, Chair.
That sounds to me, Ms Dickinson, as if it's what happened here last time round. I mean, there are vague cobwebs at the back of my mind which say that is indeed the process that was adopted here.
Sorry, just back through you, Chair. Thank you. That was clarification at that point. In which case, as well as the public, one of the other very key stakeholders in this are the members themselves. If they are to have confidence and be minded to put a plan forward, then it's quite critical that they are entirely engaged with the plan throughout the entire process. I speak as a member, obviously, who sits on planning, so I'm fully engaged, but I also have spent a much more significant time as a member who hasn't sat on planning during the joint local plan process. And this isn't just through one administration, it's through two different administrations. And I think sometimes there can be a feeling from members that they're not quite entirely connected with the process. And I think that it's quite critical that as this plan develops, that members as a whole, and it's not just reliant on the members who are on planning, have the opportunity to engage with the process, understand the process. And that is in no way criticism of the work that's been done so far. It has been very excellent. It's just really to emphasize that members do need to be kept as part of that process.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Northcott, I think, wished to make a point.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Sean, again for your presentation. I suppose I'll start off with Councillor Jones's comment. We welcome member engagement, but you can only go so far in getting members involved. They've got to have an active role in this as well. And of course, they'll have the added benefit of being able to advise their communities in which they serve and represent, which will also add value to the final mix. But I just wanted to make some other observations and bring things to the mix. My experiences as a county councillor, meeting with parish councils so far, this has been almost 100% unanimous vote in terms of going our own way. They see particularly the rural area as having a say in this. They felt very much disengaged, the joint local plan process, because they feel that it was going out of date year by year as it progressed, and it wasn't really truly reflective of Newcastle and its unique characteristics. They felt that because Stoke-on-Trent didn't have any neighbourhood development plans, that they felt that they weren't really interested in local development plans. And as a result of that, wasn't really mentioned that much detail in the joint local plan. So they felt quite left out by that, and feel quite invigorated in terms of having the opportunity to reset the clock, so to speak, where neighbourhood development plans, as we've heard from the head of planning, Sean Fleet, and also the government's drive for this to be a leader for planning policy. Now, not every area is going to have a neighbourhood development plan. This is by no means devaluing the local plan. It just means that added value will be brought to the plan where it's applicable in terms of extra information going in and feeding into the overall mix in terms of both strengthening policies and housing allocations. It's not the be all and end all, it adds value, and it's just to say that communities that aren't represented by neighbourhood development plans will equally be taken into account. More thorough scrutiny will be allocated by the planners in areas that haven't been forthcoming and fortunate enough to get these things off the ground. But it's very important that we realise that this plan, should it be adopted at the Cabinet tomorrow, will represent 15 years or more in terms of where we go. The head of planning has mentioned briefly HS2, but that's going to be an important part for the 9 to 10 years that's going to be up and building. Not only is it because it dissects the Borough Council land in half, but it's going to be, of course, things like jobs, employment, also locally, and the allocation of people to be accommodated that will be working on HS2. This is going to be a massive project, and I think, you know, we need to bring the local plan up to date on this. And I'm aware that Stoke have got different aspirations in terms of HS2, and that's where it's going to be difficult to actually keep the joint local plan together on this, because both councils will have different needs, especially on this. And I think that the residents are quite switched on to the fact of the local plan process, and the idea of digital consultation means that we can actually in advance target specifically where we need to gather our information from, so it is accurate. We're not just waiting for it to come in, and more people now, I accept that everybody isn't digitally savvy, but more and more people have been brought up to date, and this COVID crisis has shown the appetite for people to get more engaged with what's going on in their community. So I see that as a very positive thing going forward, and I think it only adds value to the actual local plan that we're looking to bring to Newcastle. It is more reflective to the needs of Newcastle and its residents, And of course, HS2 will also open up the opportunities in terms of junction 16 and the fact that the HS2 and crew, some of the Kiel, I know that some of the Kiel staff actually get the train from crew station. So this will open up the other side of the employment prospects, and will also add value to this, which I feel as a joint local plan, that wouldn't be able to be the case, because we'd feel some way obligated to Stoke City Council in terms of as a joint local plan. But as a standalone plan, we're free to make our own decisions. And I can only see this as a positive thing for residents going forward, particularly in the 15 years. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Reddish.
Thank you. Follow on really from Councillor Jones about engagement of not just the residents but of the councillors, and I think I'd like to propose that we actually have a training session for all councillors, not just the planning, in the hope that it enhances engagement. So I think I'd like to put that forward as a proposal, that we have a all-embracing training session on the local plan.
Okay, so basically, Councillor, you'd be thinking of something which would introduce members to the timetable of the plan and remit of the plan and things of that nature. Yeah,
similar to the presentation we've had today, but because I think there are a lot of councillors who are not engaged in this process at the moment, and at least we need to give them the opportunity.
I think we can certainly take that on board, Councillor, and I don't see, especially in this day and age of Zoom, why we couldn't have a meeting of that sort. It's just a question of the timetabling of said meeting, isn't it? Yeah. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our officers for the report. Part of me wants to say, I told you so, and I did tell them so some years ago now, 7 according to the report, when this was initially proposed, a joint local plan with the city next door. There have been delays. I think one of the issues with a joint plan of that nature, the one that's being proposed, is that you always move at the speed of the slowest partner. And that's not a criticism of either authority. They're both excellent Conservative-led councils, but the slowest partner isn't always the same partner. And any delay that one council encounters, whether that's with consultation or background preparation, a collection of data, is magnified when you've got the delays of another partner. And we've now been at this for far too long, and we need to adopt a local plan that's suitable to our needs. And I'm delighted that the report charts us a course out of the problems that we're in at the moment. So this is something which, according to our report, the consultation is wildly popular with our local residents. It's something that, according to our consultants, will assist us in getting our local plan sorted quicker than it would otherwise be done if we continued with the joint local plan. So I very much welcome the report. And on that basis, I'd like to suggest, if we could propose an amendment to the recommendation that's in front of us. This is going to Cabinet, and it's recommended that we receive the information. I'd like to go one further and suggest that as the Development Control Committee, as the Planning Committee, we approve of it. We endorse this and say to Cabinet that we think this is the way forward. And it does present us with lots of opportunities. Since this process started, since the JLP began, we've had a complete change in senior leadership. There are lots of new ideas there. There are even new ideas coming forth from members of the committee tonight. But all of these things, I have no joy in taking a piece of work that's been in progress for many years now and cancelling it, starting again. But this is something that could really help us. And I believe in the long run, it will be beneficial both for the borough and for the city, because both authorities will be in future, soon, I hope, able to open and complete a local plan that is suitable to their own needs, meets the needs of those people to whom they are accountable, which is the residents of our area who elected us to represent them. So that's a proposed amendment, Chair, if that's helpful.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And I think everyone saw on the chat function that Councillor Cooper, I'm assuming, is seconding that proposal. I don't know if Councillor Cooper has got audio problems, but
yes, I agree. Yes, sorry, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Before we move to that, because that will require a vote, obviously, I know Councillor Williams wishes to speak. So Councillor Williams.
Just get on mute. Thank you.
You're okay now. You're okay, John.
Thank you. Both of us are here, myself and Councillor Joe Williams. We've had some technical difficulties, but those looking at the screen at this moment in time. And thank you for the officers for the presentation, excellent presentation. Thank you very much for that. Quite clear and understanding. Firstly, we're all in this together. And it's quite, I find it quite exciting that we're moving forward with the local plan for the future of the borough, economic and what's in for the borough. Find it all of us together, no matter what political party, what creed or colour. People like to break us down into groups and keep it bring that into the planning, but it's not quite so. We're all together, and I want to keep making that point, Mr. Chairman. And we've discussed this with you in the past. We feel about planning in the borough for the regeneration of the borough. One of the things that I was concerned about were the costs of the going alone, which looks to be, if memory serves you right, nearly double what we would have done with a joint local plan. On saying that, moving forward, we need to work it together, and I hear Councillor Northcott again sticking for the rural side of the borough. But we're all together, and we've got through the urban core as well. There's a lot of green spaces. We're coming in for at least one of them in my area. Come for planning permission from the county council, staff's county council, which in my view has got to go through the local plan. So I look forward in working that through and representing my residents or our residents. We have moved on in the sense where the policy, national policy has changed, Brexit, and we've got the COVID now, and hopefully we'll get through this. We'll get through this together and come back at the other end as a better country and the residents in it. One of my big concerns is where, for the Brexit side of it, where the funding for Brexit. And I would like to ask you, Mr. Chairman, the officer, we'll be have to work closely with the city as a North Staffs area that has suffered with the loss of jobs. And the infrastructure is not that good. Where we had funding from Europe, where does that come in now? And where will we fight that? Will we fight that together as a two? What impact will that have the local plan? That's the point I'm making. Will funding for the infrastructure and creating jobs within North Staffordshire? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't know if Mr. Fleet could address that question.
Yes. Whilst I'm not an expert on European funding structures and everything else, I am aware that it has been part of the development process and funded development over the last few years. I know as well, though, that the government have picked up on that, and they are looking through the sort of transition from Europe to try and emulate or replace some of those funding structures. I fully anticipate that what we'll see in the next few years ahead is a whole raft of new initiatives that will be coming forward. Where they're targeted in the UK, what types of development they support, I don't know. It would be wrong of me to even sort of speculate, I think, on them. But I know through our regeneration colleagues who also work with us on the parts of the plan, they will be attuned to some of those initiatives coming through, and we'll be looking to see what opportunities they bring through. Now, whether that's highway infrastructures, new build of properties, other elements that come through, we will be going through 2021-22 in that earlier phase of the plan process, trying to pick up on either the opportunities that are created or the gaps that are left behind in the sort of new economic climate. and we will be looking to see how that dovetails with new development, whether the development industry in North Staffordshire helps bridge some of those gaps, or whether it moves us into new locations which we previously hadn't thought of. I appreciate it's a bit of a vague answer, but it is very much sort of crystal ball territory, looking at the sort of post-Brexit landscape. But we are aware totally of it, and I think we have the right people in to help us make the most of that new future. Thank you, Chair.
Would I also be right, Mr. Fleet, in saying that, you know, just because we don't have a joint local plan with the city doesn't mean that we can't, and indeed in some cases are bound to cooperate with them and indeed other neighbouring authorities in other ventures. That one can be a neighbour without jumping into bed, so to speak. Well, in the planning sense anyway.
Yeah. Yes, certainly. This comes into the area of the duty to cooperate. So a very clear example is something like the A500, how investment on one site feeds into that and how it sort of runs through to the M6 or down to the back end. But it's very much, we'll be looking at those elements of education, healthcare, all those other infrastructure elements across the boundary and how they support the two communities. But they will be with a Newcastle perspective and a Stoke perspective, not as a joint plan.
Thanks very much, Mr. Fleet. Councillor Holland, I think again.
Thank you, Chair. Only to say that Councillor Williams raised a very important point about the costs associated with pursuing a local plan independent of the JLP. Can our officer reassure us that a lot of the costs, particularly the costs sunk into forming the evidence base for a local plan, have already been met, and that it will not, as Councillor Williams said, double the cost over the lifetime of the local plan for us to go it alone at this stage? I don't believe that's correct. I believe there is an additional cost associated with going it as a single Newcastle local plan, but it's nowhere near as catastrophic as he would seem to suggest, particularly with the excellent work that's already been done.
Mr. Chairman, that was misquoted there again, as usual, by the councillor. I didn't say it will double. I said, has it doubled? I was asking the question. But I didn't say. Don't put words in people's mouths, please, councillor.
Okay, let's see if we can have a sort of definitive answer from our officer that will put this one to bed. To keep using that metaphor, perhaps I should get off that metaphor. Mr. Please.
No, thank you, Chair. There will be some additional costs coming into this process. We will be restructuring some of the personnel behind the service. There'll be people who've been cross-working between the two authorities. There will be some investment in technology and the sort of project management side of it as well. Definitely a sort of an uplift in the sort of resources and tools we use to keep the plan on track. And as Councillor Holland and sort of highlights, yes, there will be some additional cost, and we expect that to be addressed in the medium-term financial plan. We don't think it will get to the point of being a doubling of the plan, but it will be a notable cost, and the figures are in the proposals for Cabinet there. And it will be something that we think, yes, we're going to advance the resourcing that we currently have, step up our game on this, and actually get that plan in place. Now, there's two sides to the cost equation. One is the cost that the local authority expend on producing what traditionally has been a nice glossy book with some bits of plans in it and some policies. But that glossy book also shapes development in the borough, and it can act as an investment tool to show opportunities for growth and new businesses to invest, new housing growth to come into the borough. And that as well brings money back into the borough, whether that's basically as sort of council tax receipts or business rates. Those funds come back into the equation as well. And we think by accelerating the plan process and trying to get to that finishing line of an adopted plan sooner rather than later, we can actually start to encourage some of that investment back into Newcastle in the appropriate sustainable locations to help the businesses and people and environment of the borough.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fleet. Are there any, we've got one vote to take this evening at least. Are there any comments further comments from members before we proceed to have a vote? Looking around, Councillor Northcott.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to make you aware that there is a second proposal, and that one was for the training, and the second one was the one that was proposed by Councillor Mark Holland in terms of the this body actually approving the report and the recommendations that go with it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Northcott. Let's have a think. Why don't we start, because I don't think it's dependent on which way the other vote goes, with the proposal that Councillor Reddish has, that a training session about the local plan process be set up for all members at some reasonably near point in the future. If that needs a formal seconder, I'm happy to formally second that from the chair. I'll take a vote on that now, unless Councillor Moffat wishes to speak to the resolution. No. So I'll go by screen again, because it doesn't jump around as much as the participants thing on Zoom, seemingly. If I do not call your name, please make me aware of that, and apologies in advance. So, Councillor Owen.
In favour.
Councillor Reddish.
In favour.
Councillor Jones.
In favour.
Councillor Moffat.
Favour.
Councillor Mrs. Williams.
Sorry, Chair. In favour.
And Councillor Williams.
In favour.
Councillor Holland.
In favour.
Councillor Northcott.
In favour, Chair.
Councillor Burgess.
In favour, Chair.
Councillor Cooper.
In favour, Chair.
Councillor Maxfield.
In favour, Chair.
I think that's everyone, and I think that has passed unanimously. I'll now move to our second vote of the evening, which is is the proposal of Councillor Holland, seconded by Councillor Cooper, that we add to the recommendation tonight that this committee recommends to the Cabinet that we go ahead to form a local plan just for Newcastle-under-Lyme. I look to Councillor Holland first of all to make sure that I've not put words in his mouth.
No, of course not, Chair. I'm happy with that, and I'd like to apologise to Councillor Williams if he feels that I have misrepresented him. Happily, this is all available on the recording for people to look back through and to relive exactly what he said.
Right, it's very nice of you to point out that this is an heirloom for all of us, as indeed the historian of Thucydides would have said, Councillor Holland. But let's get back to the vote this evening.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. What's the recommendation, officer's recommendation?
The officer's recommendation is that, as it has printed, that simply we note the contents of the report that's going to Cabinet. What I think Councillor Holland wants to do is to say that that we note these, but that we feel that having a local plan just for Newcastle is the more appropriate of the two options. Again, I look to Councillor Holland to make sure I'm not misrepresented him, because he's obviously serious with the vote.
Yeah, could I ask a question on the recording? Will it be recorded at full council? Will there, a copy of this recording on full council? Is that what?
My understanding is, Councillor, that these recordings on YouTube are there available forever for the general public. So once it's recorded tonight, it's recorded.
Yeah, thank you. I'll look at YouTube. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So
I am assuming that we'll have a copy of the slides, Mr. Fleet. I know some of us have already had it, but for those who haven't.
Yes, certainly, through the chair. But I will distribute the slide pack to all of you after the meeting.
Yes, that'd be very helpful. Actually, in some ways, Mr. Fleet, I think there might be some merit in saying that they could be distributed to all members. I mean, they're slightly out of context, but I think they could be helpful in that regard. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Just before we proceed to the vote on that amendment, you were just articulating the wording of the amendment, and then some other points came up. I wonder if just before we vote on it, you could just articulate the wording of the amendment, because as articulated, I could understand what we were voting on, but I just wanted to make sure that the whole thing was covered before we voted.
Okay, Councillor Jones. And again, I look to Councillor Holland to leap in and correct me if I get this wrong. My understanding is that the councillor wishes to add to the recommendation this evening that in the view of this committee, the best course to take would be to develop a local plan solely for this borough.
Correct, Chair.
So that is the amendment proposed in front of us, and if you're in favour of that, please vote yes when I call your name. So, Councillor Owen.
In agreement, Chair.
Councillor Reddish.
Yes.
Councillor Jones.
Yes.
Councillor Moffat.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor and Mrs Williams.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Williams.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Holland.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Northcott.
In favour, Chair.
Councillor Burgess.
In favour, Chair.
Councillor Cooper.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Maxfield.
In favour, Chair.
Again, I believe I've now called everyone, looking at my screens. So that amendment is passed unanimously. And that brings us, colleagues, to the end of this evening's proceedings. I don't know of any urgent business as specified by the relevant section of the relevant act. I looked at our officers. I don't think we have any extra business this evening. In that case, all that it remains for me to do, I think, is to thank our officers for a very full and clear presentation this evening, and that is much appreciated, I think, by absolutely everyone. And to wish everyone a very pleasant rest of the evening. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank
you,
you,
Mr.
Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.